Well, Kent Adams here. Good morning, good afternoon to you. This is the Pulse of Spokane. As you can see, my guest is already on screen, so he's getting plenty of screen time and so forth. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for
Okay.
having me, Ken.
Yeah, go. Good to have you. We'll get you back in the studio one of these days, but something like you got to get kids back in school between you and your wife.
Yeah,
You have certain days and so forth. And
exactly.
should I tell the audience what you were doing last week? No, I won't. I won't. I won't do that. But anyway, we're going to talk about the Washington Policy Center today, and it's good to have Chris back on right after this.
When you donate your vehicle to the Union Gospel Mission, you're not just giving a car. You taught your kids to drive in this car. You sent your first kid off to college. You brought your baby home. This car isn't just transportation, it's a piece of your history. Keep the good memories going. When you donate, you're providing food, shelter, and the opportunity for a whole new life.
Well, welcome back. Hi, Chris. Um, you're the Washington Policy Center. For those folks that haven't seen you for a while and we haven't talked about, what is the Washington Policy Center?
Yeah, the Washington Policy Center is an independent think tank. So, if people have heard of the Heritage Foundation or the Brookings Institute, the American Enterprise Institute, those are national think tanks. We're a think tank on a statewide level. So,
Okay.
we've been in existence now for more than 20 years,
Oh, wow.
formerly as the Washington, I'm sorry?
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah,
Didn't realize that was that long.
yeah. It's been quite a long time, actually. A lot of people don't necessarily realize it was the mid '90s, actually mid to late '90s, that our organization came into being. So we consist of 8 different research centers: a center for education, agriculture, environment, government reform, healthcare, small business, transportation, worker rights, and then we also run the website called WashingtonVotes.org, which is a free public service website where you can track all of the bills and things that are going on during the legislative session.
Yeah. We've been through quite a year here, almost a year. Seems like it's been a decade with COVID and all of the
Yeah, it
impact on
does.
our community, and I think specifically more of the Spokane area community, Eastern Washington, and so forth. Um, and now we're kind of headed back to a more normal situation. Certainly not there yet. What worries me and probably worries you day and night has been what our governor has been doing, and with the powers that he's had supposedly, and the lockdown and so forth. But more importantly, where I'm going is the taxes that now are coming up as a result of that. Everything can be solved, according to our governor and those on the left, by taxing more. I start to think of things that I relate to, and that's the gas tax that could go up basically $1 per gallon more after we brought it down. And who knows what's going to happen nationally with the Keystone pipeline going away and so forth. We talk about everything being local, but some of it comes from national, certainly comes from this state and so forth. So let's talk, first of all, um, something that you guys do on a daily, hour by hour basis, and that is monitor what the heck is going on to bring a free market thinking to what impact it has on business primarily, but on the rest of us. Because when business has to pay for it, it comes to us as a consumer.
Yeah, and it's pretty remarkable how many different tax increases are being proposed this legislative session. I think it's worth kind of taking a step back
Okay.
and saying, okay, what have the people of the state done in terms of tax revenues? What have they provided, not only local governments, but also the state government, and even to a lesser extent, we could have this discussion about the federal government as well. But kind of zooming in here on the state. The amount of revenue that the state has is not declining. It is increasing and increasing at pretty healthy clips. I mean, the forecasted revenues for this next biennium are going to be up almost another 8%. And each and every year, they are increasing anywhere from, I'm looking at the graphic right here just to make sure I have the numbers right, 6.3%, 10.1%, 8.1%. I mean, these are large, these are healthy numbers.
Yes.
And so this argument that Olympia does not have enough money to do all the things that it wants to do really falls, I think, on deaf ears when people look at the facts.
Even
Now,
with the impact of COVID?
even with the impact of COVID, I mean, we were even with the impact of Boeing moving their lines out of the state. The state revenues are still forecasted to be up. And this doesn't come from us. This doesn't come from, any politician who's trying to, push an agenda.
Right.
This
right.
actually comes from the Washington Economic and Revenue Forecast Council, which is a part of the state government. So the state government tracks this stuff. Obviously, it's very important to them to figure out what tax revenues are doing.
Right.
But revenues continue to be up, even with the impact of COVID. Now, the caveat to this is that they might not be up enough to keep up with the spending. And that's where you run into the issue.
It always comes
So,
down to spending, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I mean, if you look at the last two bienniums, for example, we have increased state spending 36%. So 36% in 4 years. Those are remarkable increases. The governor's proposed budget this year wants to add another 8% onto that. So obviously, we'd be looking at budget increases of more than 40% if the governor gets his way. We haven't seen the proposals yet from the House and the Senate, but if the governor gets his way, we'd be looking at more than 40% increase in state spending.
And none of us are going to get
years.
none of us are going to get that in payroll increases, right?
What do you mean?
Well, our incomes, our personal incomes, are not going to go up 40% in 5
Oh,
years.
exactly. That's
You know what I
exactly
mean?
right. I hesitated to answer that question because there are different payroll type taxes being introduced. So you might be paying for it via your payroll. But
Yes.
yeah, exactly. I mean, your home budgets are not seeing 40% increases over the past 4, 5, 6 years. You're just not, especially in a COVID environment.
Yes. Yeah.
Where some people are probably unemployed or are underemployed because of the state shutdowns. So back to kind of your previous comments about taxes, even with those increases in revenue, it is remarkable to see so many different tax increases and tax proposals being introduced. I mean, just a few of them here. There's this proposal for a 9% income tax, starting with capital gains. There's a proposal for a wealth tax of 1%.
That's against the Constitution of the state of Washington.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly just very disturbing and disputed
Yes.
proposals being put forward. And quite frankly, some of them, if they were to pass, would almost immediately be challenged in court.
Right.
So there's dispute about whether a tax on capital gains is truly consistent with the state's constitution.
Right.
But one thing there is not a dispute about is that a capital gains tax is an income tax.
Okay.
All the revenue departments in all 50 states say
Yes.
that. The IRS says that.
Right.
The only people saying that it is not an income tax are the legislators trying to get it passed in Olympia.
And that's
And so,
primarily on one side of the fence as well, right?
And it's not just that side of the fence. I mean, there are many Democratic legislators who disagree with this idea as well, or are uneasy about this idea.
Okay.
But I mean, there's also this governor's proposal for a new $3.25 tax per person per month on health insurance plans. There's talk about taking this Seattle City jobs tax statewide. And then just in the past few days, we've seen a new proposal to start a sweetened beverage tax, doing what Seattle did on sweetened beverages, taking it statewide. So, I mean, that sweetened beverage tax amounts to a little under 2 cents per fluid ounce. But if you just do the quick math on that, you're looking at about $5 per 24 ounce or per 24 pack, I should say, of a sweetened beverage. So, I mean, that is going to, again, if you're in Wenatchee, Yakima, you don't have any choice. You have to pay that. If you're in a border community like Spokane or Pullman or Liberty Lake, you can go right across the border
Exactly.
and save $5, $10.
Well, you can save a buck or two on gas right now. It'll be as that much or more if gasoline cost goes up a buck or buck and a half between state and local and so forth. So where's the incentive to shop local? I mean, the governor and the Democrats, basically, for the most part, forget about Clark County and Spokane County and those that have competition in a 15-minute drive on an average to get access,
Oh, absolutely. And the bad part about all this, I mean, you can argue back and forth about whether sweetened beverages are good or bad. That's a health discussion, and we're not having that discussion today.
Right.
My focus is on the fact that this is going to hurt businesses in our area.
Yes.
And by extension, it's going to hurt tax revenues in our area.
Yes.
So if the city of Spokane notices a dip in sales tax revenue, however small it might be because of soda, or if the city of Spokane Valley or Pullman or Liberty Lake,
right,
if this goes into effect, they're going to see reductions in their sales tax revenues as well, which hurts their ability to provide programs or to do all the things that our local cities do such a good job of doing.
Yeah. What else should we be on the lookout for right now with the state? Now you have to keep it under an hour.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things. It's supposed to be a long 105-day legislative session. As you mentioned, the Democrats are in control of both chambers.
Yes.
By pretty healthy margins. So really, anything that the Democrats want to pass, they can pass, and not really have to worry about working together with Republicans. That's the difference between what's happening at the state level and what's happening in the federal government.
Right.
I mean, the Senate in the U.S. government is 50-50, so you kind of have to have the middle folks buying into any proposal that's put forward.
Yeah,
the House
but Camilla can walk in and solve that problem on many of the issues, though, too.
But, I mean, there are still conservative Democratic senators who are not going to go along with everything.
Right, right.
In the Washington State House and Washington State Senate, there are some conservative Democratic senators who are not going to go along with everything. Right. But the cushion that the Democratic caucus has is so large that they don't really need to worry about trying to placate those conservative members. So that gives you a lot of pause on some of these more, some would say, radical proposals, like starting a state income tax or a wealth tax, or, quite frankly, the discussion that's going on right now with trying to claw back some of the legislative authority when it comes to lockdowns.
Yes.
I mean, we're one of only 4 states that give our governor this huge, enormous authority to basically use emergency powers to lock down a state. And there's been a lot of discussion about whether the legislature needs to reassert its role in some of these decisions.
Where do you think that's going to go? Do you think there'll be a revamping of that, at least a reasonable revamping of that?
Well, there certainly should be. I was on a I was on a video call this week with Representative Mike Chapman, who's a Democrat from the 24th district, so over on the west side, and he said, look, there's a lot of anger bubbling at the surface, if you will, or I should say bubbling under the surface about this particular issue, and if the people rise up enough, essentially, to want this change or to want the legislature to be more involved, he says he's convinced that will happen. I mean, he pointed to the whole public records dispute a couple of years ago when the legislature passed that really with overwhelming bipartisan majorities. There was such a public outcry about it. You had it change within the week. So, I mean, he's suggesting that if that kind of public outcry comes into this particular situation, we could definitely see a change. But I mean, I'll just be honest with you, Kent. This issue was up in several votes and several bills that have had public hearings over the past few weeks in the legislative session. And the leadership in both houses doesn't seem to be all that interested in reasserting its role. I mean, as anyone knows from just your standard civics class, we're supposed to have a separation of powers. We're supposed to have checks and balances.
Right.
Really, you have to ask yourself,
We're not
what
right
is
now.
the point of having a legislature
Yeah.
if only one person, i.e. the governor, is making all these decisions?
Yeah. What can let me ask kind of a naive question, but I think it might help all of us. What can we do as voters, especially, we're on the east side. We all know, I mean, where we stand on the state level and everything else. But what can Mr. and Mrs. voter out there, citizen out over here do to help move that forward and get more attention?
Well,
Other than
the answer I always have to,
every couple of years there's an election, I realize that, and
yeah.
and we mess that up sometimes. But I mean, what can we do now? Because this is a current problem. We're driving businesses out of business right now.
Yeah, and I always kind of have the same answer to this question, and that is to emphasize the fact that the majority of people don't know who their state legislators are. They're not involved. They can tell you who the president is.
Yeah.
They can tell you sometimes who their congressperson is or who their senator is, but they don't know who's on their local council. They don't know who their state representative is or their state senator is.
Right.
And so as a result of that, we don't see very much public interaction or public engagement with the legislature. However, that is changing a little bit. And I think the reason why it's changing is because of what's happening with COVID. But I think it's also people are coming under the realization that what a local council might do or what the state legislature might do has much more of an impact on you than what they're doing in Washington, D.C.
All politics are local when it comes down to
exactly.
it. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, to your question about what can you do, the great part about this legislative session is that it's virtual.
Yeah.
And therefore, they're allowing a lot of remote testimony.
Yes.
In fact, nearly 1,700 people signed in to submit comments or testify on the reopening bill. Now, unfortunately, the legislature didn't spend very much time on that bill, only took comments from about 40 people and muted their mics after 1 minute. However, if we continue to see that type of engagement in all of these different bills and public hearings that are being put forward, I would venture a guess that we're going to see some movement on some of these issues.
Yeah. And what we do here, and our base is small business. I mean, that's what we focus on here at Spokane Talks, small business and the community. And I've said this before, but not to you. That is, I've talked to a lot of small business owners, and I'll ask them, how are you doing? And most of them well up in their eyes, and tears start coming to them. And I don't know if I can stay with this much longer. I'm not worried about being bankrupt myself or whatever, but Kent, I've got wonderful employees. I know their families. I know when their kids' birthdays are and all of that. And I have to face them. I can only give them part-time hours or whatever, or their situation is such that they have to stay home with the kids and so on. And if you're a restaurant, that doesn't help because they can't serve or cook from home. You know what I mean? And it's destroying the heart of our community with the small businesses, while the big box stores continue to be open. And we've whether it takes an act of all of us just doing what we darn well please and define the government, if you will, that may be, I'm not suggesting that today, but that may be what we have to do.
Well, I mean, you're already seeing some of that feedback from the state or from the local health departments. I mean,
Yeah.
we just got a letter this morning from the from the Whatcom County Health Department, basically saying that the metrics that Governor Inslee has put forward are not acceptable. We also saw a very damaging letter. I would call it damaging. I'm sure others probably have that same thought from Democratic legislators in different counties that are not opening as part of the governor's newest metrics. I mean, for instance, I want to just read part of this letter that came from the Senator Kevin DeWage, who is a Democrat from the Sequim area, Representative Steve Theringer, and Representative Mike Chapman. In a letter to Governor Inslee, it says, it is clear that the governor's plan exhibits a disastrous disconnect with the realities of our community. And as their elected representatives, we demand a reopening plan that is fair and sound. The current plan is neither. I mean,
Wow.
And those are Democrats speaking to this
Wow.
particular situation. So it is not a party issue.
Yeah.
It is not a partisan issue.
No.
You
No.
can be a small business owner has voted Democrat your entire life. You can be a small business owner who's voted Republican your entire life.
Well,
And the impacts of this are being felt in businesses on both sides.
from the very beginning, and you've probably used language like this, we've really had two viruses. One is the virus that affects people physically and in an illness way. The second virus is what we're seeing is what's going on, the economic virus. The suicides are up, the not going to school and what's happening, especially for middle school and high school and so forth. We're starting to lose a generation here. And we need to be proactive, and I think that's why there's a lot of discussion about the school levy, while that's going forward and so forth at the level. And they've already admitted if it doesn't pass, they'll come back with a smaller one. To me, that's admitting defeat, or admitting, at least from the school district's point of view, that is too high. We recognize it, so let's call them on it. And I mentioned to you before we went on the air, I cannot believe the number of business people I've talked to in the last 2 weeks that are voting no. And traditionally, this business community has always stood up for schools. I have as well. It's time to say no after we've had a disastrous board, and still do, Board of Education and what they've accepted, and an administration that doesn't really care about the taxpayers and what's going on with the kids. It's time to say no and let them know who's really in charge. Us.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see some of the reaction that parents have had. I agree.
Yeah.
To these levies and other levies that are being put up all across the state. And parents are frustrated. They're angry that schools have not reopened,
Right.
but at the same time are running daycare centers in the schools if you pay the school district extra. I mean, we're seeing that in other in districts across the state as well. So I agree that, and I'm not going to tell people how to vote. People can make up their own mind. Our
Right.
Leave Finna has put together an analysis of the
Yes.
Spokane
Very good.
proposal as well, which despite what the district is saying, it is an increase in the tax
Yes.
rate.
Yes.
It might not be, it is a levy extension. That's what they're referring to it as, a levy extension, but it is a pretty large increase in the tax rate. So people need to be aware of that. But as far as just this general talk about getting kids back in school, I agree 100%. I mean, parents are trying to struggle. I feel terrible for instance, the single mom who's
Yes.
got a day job, who has maybe 2 kids at home, who doesn't necessarily have high-speed internet, and yet is forced to embark on a schooling program while at the same time trying to hold down her job as well.
And it's
And that's who's
affected.
being hurt.
It's affected women more than men
yeah,
across the state
absolutely.
and here locally
I mean,
and so forth. Which-
32, a surprising statistic, and I think some people are surprised it's not higher. 32,000 kids have left the K through 12 system in Washington State, public
Wow.
schooling system.
Yeah.
That is the equivalent of losing the entire Spokane Public School District.
Exactly.
That's the size of the Spokane Public School District.
Yeah.
So where have they gone? Well, parents have pulled them out. Parents have said, you know what? if the school is not going to reopen, if the school is just going to do online classes that, quite frankly, they don't know how to do,
Right.
then I'm not going to put up with it. I'm going to send my child elsewhere.
Right.
I've done that personally in our life. I've heard stories, countless stories
Right.
from other parents who have done that as well, that have said enough.
Right.
The schools need to reopen. The science says they should reopen. Even the governor said I think it was last week or the week before, that we are not asking teachers to do any more than we're asking grocery store clerks
Right.
or any
Right.
other people who are part of critical parts of the community.
Right. Right. Chris, good information. You got to make me a promise, though, that you'll come back in a couple of weeks and keep us updated, will you?
I will, absolutely. And let me
Yeah.
just say one more thing.
Yes.
Washington State is not closed down and under severe economic restrictions because of COVID. It is closed down and under severe economic restrictions because our reaction to
Yes.
COVID.
Yes.
And because of, quite frankly, the inept response that we've seen from Olympia in so many different areas.
Yes.
Had we had a
Unemployment
more organized
benefits. Do we want to talk about?
that's just one of many things.
Yeah.
Had we had a more organized and thoughtful response and a plan in place that didn't change every 2 weeks, we'd probably be in a much better position.
Yeah. You and I could talk about this for hours, and we will over the course of the next couple of months. Chris, thank you very much. How can people get more information about these issues and so forth? Website, I assume?
Yeah, WashingtonPolicy.org is a great resource for people who want to find out more about what's happening in the legislative session. And then WashingtonVotes.org is the website where you can track all the bills. So
Okay.
I'd highly recommend people go to both of those websites, and especially keep them up during the legislative session.
Yes.
But really the entire year.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Good to see you. You're not old enough to get the shot yet, are you? Or did you?
No, I think I checked in on the New York Times tracker where it says where you are in line, essentially. And keep in mind, there's about 350 million Americans. I think they said I'm like 320 millionth.
Oh, okay.
So I'll probably, it'll probably be in a year or two.
Well, I won't tell you that I got mine last Friday at 4:00.
That's more of a commentary on your age, I think.
It is very much a commentary on my age. But what I will tell you is, I know they started out rocky with not enough doses coming into Spokane on time and so forth. But when I was there Friday, they were very well organized. We had the National Guard there helping Chaz. I compliment both of them for being very effective, very friendly. As I was at the end of the day at 4:00, and they had all been there since 8:00 or earlier, and they were a pleasure. It was a good experience, as much as getting a shot can ever be, but it was a good experience. And so my hat's off to Chaz.
I've heard the same thing locally.
Yeah.
I had a couple of family members who have been able to go down and get their shots, and they've said it's all, Chaz is doing a great job.
Yes.
The National Guard, of course, always does a great job.
Right.
It has been spotty in other parts of the state because of some of the restrictions. The Department of Health says don't make an appointment, or the local health departments say don't make an appointment. Then the Department of Health says make an appointment, and so there's been fits and starts. But people who have gone down there and have been involved have told me it has been a good experience.
Yeah, it has. Chris, thank you. I look for your wife to be walking by you in the background. Yeah, she didn't do that. So anyway, but good to see you. Thank you to you and the Washington Policy Center for all you do. Excellent information. And I encourage our viewers to go take a look at the websites. Good information we should all be following at daily, because that's our money that they're spending over there in Olympia. Okay.
And what happens over there and what happens here locally has the potential to impact you more than anything else.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Have a good day.
My pleasure. Thanks, Ken.
And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the Pulse of Spokane.
The economy is getting stronger, banks are lending again, and interest rates are at historic lows. Now is a great time to buy your dream home. The caring and knowledgeable professionals at Homes for You have been helping people just like you for over 20 years. They take the time to listen to what you want and will help you find just the right home in Washington or Idaho. Real estate is what we do at Homes for You, 928-5782, or visit online at homes4uspokane.com.
This is River Ridge Frame Shop, called Frame It Today, where we can take your art, customize it, and get it ready to hang on the wall. Here at River Ridge Hardware, 2803 West Garland.
Weather in the inland Northwest can wear you down. And if your gutters are in poor condition or you do not have gutters, you could suffer damage that could cost a fortune to fix. Rainman Seamless Rain Gutters has almost 30 years of professional experience in serving the inland Northwest region and strives to ensure customer service that is second to none, from the time you call to the end of the project.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Pulse. We are where you are. Check us out on any of these other platforms as well as our website. This show is sponsored by Local 29 Firefighters Union, Homes for You, and Apex Cannabis.